or all of them, and there's some good tests you can do. And there's also some kits, which I do not have, which will test those water samples if you decide to recycle. Is anyone in here recycling? Oh, you are?
Well, not at the nursery. I mean, they're doing it at the factory in Carlsbad.
Okay,
Yeah, but everybody's using recycled for landscaping.
okay,
Yeah,
yeah. Mhm. So, the reclaimed water.
yeah.
Okay, reclaimed water is a little different than recycled water.
Oh,
Recycled water is what you're using in your nursery production, and you're taking that water, collecting what runs off, and then putting it in holding ponds, and then treating it, and that's a little different.
Is there a kit for testing phytophthora?
There are kits, yeah.
Agatia. Talk to me.
Uh,
So the Agatia,
Agdia. AGDIA. There are also leaf tests you can do where you can put leaf samples in water. You can Google that, and that actually does work. And nurseries will do that to test their own without using the kits, and they can monitor if they're treating the water correctly to kill the pathogens. Phytophthora is a really difficult one. You're not capturing the water though, are you?
No, the soil. What's in the soil?
Oh, the soil.
There's no test for that one?
Yeah, we're both. This is usually the water. I don't know if that one.
Because I have city water, so
Yeah.
the root rot is in the soil, and that's where I need to test it.
Oh, okay. That I don't know about.
I'd like to know why some of my trees just never seem to prosper,
Yeah,
and I suspect it's root
that
rot.
would be definitely a pathologist probably be looking for the reproductive spores coming up to see which things in there. So these are some media tests. This is one, and let's see what this was for. I blocked some of this out to protect it. But they do test the media, saturated media extract, and they'll saturate with water, and then suction it out to do media tests to see what's in there. But again, these tests only work if you're doing it on a regular basis. It really, one-time deal is not really going to tell you much. And they are expensive. So it's usually if you have a really high cash value crop or something that's a problem, and it's worth the money. Again, this is what UC Davis does, and you can see they don't give you any type of recommendations or anything, they just measure things. But again, that's something you could do. They don't do outside tests anymore. But yeah, testing of your medium compost can be kind of pricey. I'm going to tell you that probably what you can do in-house, again, is you can test your own. And we were talking about the nitrate meters and sodium meters before. But if you're keeping good records and you know what fertilizer you're using and you're not changing it, and your media is the same, you can actually use an EC meter, electrical conductivity, and you can measure the electrical conductivity of your different water samples, whether it's your liquid feed program or leachate from your containers. And just keep in mind, when you change things, you're going to change electrical conductivity. So you can kind of use electrical conductivity as a gauge of, like, for example, how much nitrate is in your system.
Mm-hmm.
And the way you do that is you can follow the directions of your product and measure the EC. But remember, when you change the product and they have a different formulation of nitrogen and other types of compounds in the fertilizer, it's going to change electrical conductivity. Do you understand the concept of electrical conductivity? Okay, I see some nods of yes, that's good. And then I see no nods, and then I see some people nodding off. And the reason I'm lost because I had 100 cups of coffee. But so the reason I did this, I was going to show you a sample, but I don't have to tell you. I don't have to show you, I can tell you. So I have different types of nitrogen here and 5 different vials. And each one is different. One is diammonium phosphate, ammonium phosphate, and the other one is sodium nitrate. And I have one that's ammonium nitrate, and I have one that's 20-20-20. I don't know what brand. And I have urea, vial correct, but I have liquid urea. So it ran out, and I have calcium nitrate. So let me see, how do I ask this question? So you all said you know what electroconductivity is. So, do you think any of these products would have, if I were to dissolve these fertilizers, 100 parts per million nitrogen, 100 parts per million nitrogen, doesn't matter nitrate or ammonium, just 100 parts per million nitrogen in each one of these. So they have the same concentration of nitrogen. Do you think any of these types of vials that I just read through, ammonium nitrate, ammonium phosphate, sodium nitrate, ammonium nitrate, urea, calcium nitrate, do you think any one of these would have an EC of 0? Would any one of these have an electrical conductivity of 0?
The urea?
Very good. The urea. And why is that?
Because it doesn't conduct the charge.
Urea is a neutrally charged molecule. It doesn't have a charge. It doesn't have a negative charge, it doesn't have a positive charge. It's 0. So if you have urea in your system and you're using this EC meter, you're not going to pick it up. So the next one is probably really good. What do you think monthly low electrical conductivity would be? But still have 100 parts per million nitrogen.
The lowest, the mono ammonium, wasn't that mono? What was the mono potassium?
One was ammonium, diammonium phosphate, sodium nitrate, ammonium nitrate, 20, and calcium nitrate.
Well, if the triple 20 has some urea in it, maybe that.
Yeah, I think it does because it's 0.31. Okay, so you're probably right on that one. And which one do you, well, let me see here. I see which one's the highest. Okay, what's interesting, and I'll tell you, the sodium nitrate, the diammonium phosphate, and the, are also a tie. They have 0.82 electrical conductivity, and ammonium nitrate is 0.54. That one's not bad either. So the takeaway message is when you change your fertilizer types and you want to use this as your gauge because you have nothing else, then you need to be sure that you keep track of things and you remeasure it and get a new baseline for that fertilizer, even the 20, because not all 20, 20s are the same. The formulations may be different. So, but that's how you can use an EC meter to get an idea of where you are with things. The other thing that's going to change your electrical conductivity, when I did this, all these fertilizers were dissolved in deionized water. So there was a charge of 0 to begin with. But you're probably going to be starting with 1 or something like that. And so you have to add to it from that. So your EC for the urea will still be 1, right? Urea will still be a 0 charge because there's no charge to urea because it's not negatively or positively charged. The next one's like the 20 that I have, but I forget what company it was. So the EC would be 1.32, which is still good. So keep that in mind when you're doing things. It makes a big difference here. So, and that was, I was going to demonstrate that, but I don't need to do that any further than what we did. Okay. So the other thing is if you do a pour-through method, and the pour-through method is where you take a container and you put the container in a pot, and it's a little bit elevated, so it's not sitting in the pot completely. So you pour through a known volume of water and let it drain until it's reached water holding capacity completely. And then you come back, and then usually we do it the day before. Then we water again, and we get about 25% pour through, and we collect that and measure the EC. And that will give us an idea of what the salt content of the media is. So the key here is to be consistent. If you decide, and keep records, if you decide that you're going to do this and you want to collect 50 mils or 100 mils of volume, when you do this, then make sure your procedures are the same so that you can compare apples to apples. Because if you do this one day and you leach it out and you collect 100 mils, and the next day you leach out 50 mils, next week or whatever, you're gonna have a concentration difference just because of your methods have changed. So it's about having consistent methods on that. And then the tissue. So when you're monitoring, probably the easiest stuff to do is monitoring water. And the next easiest would be monitoring media. The tissue you're gonna have to send in. There's no way around that. You probably don't have the money unless you're a millionaire. Follow the directions of the lab. Like I said, with tissue tests, right? Remember we went through the macronutrients, immobile. The mobile nutrients, the deficiency symptoms are going to be on the oldest leaves. So if you're sending in tissue samples, you just haphazardly are removing tissue samples, and you're taking old leaves and new leaves, you're canceling out your symptoms, and you're not going to see anything. You're going to be more confused than you ever were. So make sure you try to use symptomatic and non-symptomatic from the plant. Try to use the same cultivar. So you have all these different citrus varieties. Be careful. So try to use the same cultivar. Try to find some that are healthy, the same age leaf, and others that aren't healthy, the symptomatic ones, of the same age leaf. Keep them separate, and that way you can compare the two for your system. And make sure you use the same plant species and the same cultivar. And then keep records. You have to keep records. Collect them during the same stage of plant development. Okay, I talked about that camellia study, right? And so it was during the first flush of growth that we had the deficiency symptoms in January, February, March. It wasn't in November, it wasn't in October, it wasn't during flowering time. It's not only time of the year, it's a time in the cycle of the plant, right? Plants go through cycles. They have a flowering cycle, a fruit set cycle, and all that's going to influence nutrient concentration in the leaves. So you have to make sure you're comparing them at the same time. The other thing is we live in a wonderful climate. We were talking about our wonderful Santa Anas. And so if you still have leaves on your trees after a Santa Ana event, make sure that you clean the leaves. Rinse them with clean water to make sure you get the dust and stuff off of them. And again, collect mature leaves or new leaves depending on where your problem is occurring. And here's a sample again. This one's blackberry, and they are able to give recommendations because they have the standard for what a blackberry leaf should be at a certain stage of development, and so they can give recommendations. For our ornamentals, we really can't give recommendations because we have so many different plant types. That's just the University of California, what their analysis looks like, and even though they're very good, it leaves us guessing a lot of what we have. We're not really sure because they don't give any recommendations or grades of whether it's high or low. So with that,
Can't make a really quick comment
Yeah.
about testing?
Yeah.
So, when I talk about water, soil, tissue testing, I call water and soil tests predictive and tissue testing historical. Because let's say you have an azalea that likes acidic conditions, and you do a water sample and it has high pH. You can predict that azalea will have problems in the future because of the increasing pH. The same with a soil test. Let's say you plant an azalea in the ground, you do a soil test, it has high pH. You can predict that azalea will have problems. The tissue part is when it's experienced those conditions, now you got some micronutrient deficiencies showing up. That's historical because it has been exposed to those conditions that created those deficiencies or disorders. So you can use, I say that do the water tissue and soil testing to try to stay ahead of issues. You use the tissue testing to confirm what you found in maybe an anomaly in a soil test in the past or something like that. So you use the three of them together. Tissue testing is more expensive. Water testing, you can see how, we have all these instruments to do pH and EC and nitrate. Soil testing, you can do pour through, you can use the same instruments. Tissue sampling, you have to send it to a lab. So.
How about compost teas? Do you have any opinion on those?
I do not. Do you?
I do.
Oh, then give them if you want.
He asked you. You first.
No, I don't have any input on compost teas.
Yeah, so what is it? You take compost, and
Compost.
you make an extract out of them, but every extract's different because every batch of compost is different. So it's really difficult to tell what's going on. Compost is magic. There's no doubt about that. Compost is really great stuff. But the extracts, the teas that you get from them, why not just put compost on the soil?
I got a, sorry, did you have one?
No, that's fine.
I have a related question, well, kind of two-parter. I mean, there's so many of these, like, beneficial microbe
Biologicals.
mixes out there. That's one part of my question. The other part is about humic acids and fulvic acid and your opinions.
Well, with
Is it snake oil?
the
Is it,
microbes
like-
I talked about already with the mycorrhizal stuff, you know, it's when
highly site
we have fertilizers and stuff that really don't allow those things to develop and thrive in the root system. So that's usually a problem unless you really know what you're doing with the media. So with regards to the humic acids, have you worked on it? I haven't.
You know,
It's mixed.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And the research, there's a little bit of research and it's kind of all over the place.
Well, that's
And it's because where it came from.
Yeah.
It's
Like
not
the
consistent
biochar.
there.
There's no uniform, there's no
Exactly.
standard for it.
but I mean, what about fulvic acid? I mean, that's
So-
not like a somewhat definitive. This is fulvic acid.
Yeah, I haven't run across anything.
State of California doesn't recognize fulvic acid. So like our products have a lot of fulvic acid in them, but we can't claim it. And typically fulvics and humics help with minor nutrient absorption and availability. So you won't find fulvic on anything that's registered in the state of California. It may be in the product, but you won't find it.
Sorry, who are you with?
How do you fit in?
Yeah.
Sorry, wait. I just paid to get in.
Yeah.
We all look like teenagers. I'm with Harold's Fertilizer.
Harold's?
Harold's.
Harrell.
H-A.
RRELL.
I have one last question.
And you want her email address?
I don't give up my phone number.
The special water conditioners. I get a lot of questions on those, all these EcoFlow this and that. And, I've just never seen anything that really shows that they're a benefit for cleaning up water.
Water conditioners?
Oh, yeah.
Magnets?
Lauren, you've probably seen, they've been around
Oh, you
forever.
mean the magnet thing?
Yes, all
He
the,
just complimented you, I think. So,
well, I mean, experience.
Yeah, there was a guy going around selling magnets for water conditioning because it aligns the water molecules to make them more active or something. The other thing you hear about is oxygenating water, super oxygenating water.
Right.
But what happens as soon as that water hits the air? It becomes saturated, right? So you can't super saturate water unless it's in a pipe. So the super oxygenating or whatever they call it. There's some research on that. Paul Fisher at University of Florida has some online articles about that.
Is this magnetic water guy still making the rounds? I know he's talking about it.
Really?
He's been to my place.
My first exposure was in the 1980s.
Wow.
And the first question I asked him was, show me some academic replicated studies that show this is beneficial. I never saw them again.
Well, but that's
And,
gonna
you know,
be
here's the
200K to get those done. Go out for the guy.
here's the
He's
other
gotta sell
thing.
the system.
Yeah, if someone comes around and wants to sell you something like a water a system of clean water or what have you, and it seems questionable, have them make a prototype and use your water system, your site, to test it to make sure it works. Don't have them bring, well, here is so-and-so's and his work, see, blah, blah, blah. Do it online, because before you spend all that money on a system, you wanna make sure it works on your system, because it may not work.
And there are a lot of water technologies out there that are good.
Yes.
So, as far as conditioning, the products you can condition the tank with before you add products in, buffering agents are recommended just because you wanna get in the right pH zone so that you do get the most maximum effectivity of your product, use of your product. But yes, you should do water testing before and after and seeing what systems, but there are new nanofiltration systems that are out. I used to be VP of a reverse osmosis company, so I've done a lot on the water side, and I would say that, there is definitely some new technology that's out there that is beneficial and will help you reuse the water that you have, save you some.
So I was on a national research project on looking at nursery water, greenhouse water. And Paul Fisher at the University of Florida put together a website that kind of is an accumulation of all of the work that group did and others. So look up Clean Water 3 at the University of Florida. That's the website, and it's got more information than you'll ever need about water in nurseries and greenhouses. Pond maintenance, biofilms on sprinklers, all kinds of stuff in there.
Speaking of websites, do you wanna give us the website that we can get all this on, please?
Say it again?
The UCNFA website. What's the name of it again?
Clean Water 3. Oh, no.
No, the
Or the
website.
Oh, ucnfa.ucanr.edu.
You did that too fast.
UC,
Are you gonna send an
NFA.
email out with the link?
say it again?
Are you gonna send an email with this?
I can.
Or-
And also what I'm gonna do is, I'll send you all an email with the links. I'm also gonna send you a survey to evaluate this workshop, because we need that feedback. We use that feedback to help us improve. I will give you the coupons to buy these, the 22% discount or whatever they offer.
Did I get this right?
That's it? Yeah. And so that's the URL for the UC Nursery and Floriculture Alliance that we are all affiliated with.
That's an A and not an R.
Are you making fun of my?
That was an A.
UCNFA.ucanr.edu.
Got it.
And the other one's easier to
You wanna
remember.
buy a vowel?
Very good.
Okay, we're good? Okay.
The other one, the University of Florida, is easy to remember. If you just do a search on Clean Water 3, you'll go to his website. What else?
I don't know. That was pretty good.
One thing we didn't do is their water. We still have some time. We could break out these instruments and,
Mm-hmm.
did anybody bring the instruments that you use? Yeah, okay.
Oh, water.
Yeah,
You
so-
have a pH tester there as well?
We have pH, EC, we have several different kinds. It looks like Gerry and I kind of like these Hannah
Yeah.
grow line instruments. We have 3 different models of this grow line. There's this one that's got pH and EC in it. Who else makes something like this? Oakton makes one. Hariba makes one.
Blue Lab.
Blue Lab makes one. Yeah, there's a lot of them.
So the only problem with the EC-pH combos is if one breaks,
Yeah.
it's more expensive, and if one part of it breaks and the other one doesn't, you still got to replace it.
That's what I always thought that. This one, you can replace the pH cell.
Oh, wow.
This one, however, it's one sense, well, it's one probe. So this one, it has pH and EC. You have to replace this whole thing. But I like it because it's got this long cord. You can dip it into a tank or whatever. This one, you have to retrieve a sample and use it, but it's small. You can put it in your pocket.
So those are just for water, not water and soil.
No, just water. But if you want to use soil, you do the pour through, right? And then you can get the liquid you can test. Let's see what else. Don showed this little one. This one's by Hariba. This is a different Hariba. They use this a really small sample. I really like them because they use this a really small sample. But I use this for my class. But it's only conductivity, it's only EEC. You have to get a separate one for pH. And so they're like $300 each, right? And let's see what else there. And I mean, there's all kinds of stuff that you can get. The ones that I grew up with, the Myron, little black box with a meter on it. Yeah. Right, that thing's a tank, and it works okay. But it's an analog meter. It's super easy to calibrate. You push the button, you adjust the dial to line up the needles, put the water in, you take a reading. I know we had one that was all beat up. The cup was chipped. And it still worked. You know, they're tanks. And Myron makes a pen one for pH and a pen one for EC. They all have products. So one's not, I wouldn't say one's better than the other, but there are some that are better than others. I would just be careful of, if you see a deal that's too good to be true, it's probably too good to be true. And if you get an instrument from a reliable, well-known company, you're probably okay. I'll make a comment about soil moisture sensing, because that's a line of research that I've done a lot of work with. A lot of growers use soil moisture sensors to irrigate that soil when the soil dries out to a certain level, and then also to manage when you've applied enough water. Not all soil moisture sensors are the same. There's two kinds. There's volumetric water content, which is the most common, and there's matrix potential. Volumetric water content sensors tell you the percentage of water that's in the soil that could be held by that soil. Matrix potential tells you how difficult it is to remove water from the soil. It's a more difficult thing to measure, but that's essentially what the plant is experiencing, because as the soil dries down, it becomes more difficult to extract water from the soil. So that's what that's measuring. Volumetric water content, matrix potential too, is that if someone tells you need to maintain your avocados at 20 kilopascals, whatever number that is, it doesn't matter what soil type you're growing in, 20 kilopascals is the same. Volumetric water content, however, is really different. Sands at capacity might only be 5%, but a clay at capacity might be 25%. So when someone tells you you need to maintain your soil at 5%, well, in a clay, that's really dry, but in the sand, that's at saturation. So the volumetric water content numbers are highly soil specific. And it will change as your soil changes. If you're growing in a container, as that media changes and degrades, more roots are formed, that number changes. So I'm a believer in matrix potential, but
That's the ceramic tip stuff?
Yeah, like the aerometers and soil moisture sensing out of Santa Barbara makes them. So tensiometers are what measures, is a instrument that measures matrix potential. Watermark gypsum block also measures matrix potential.
And there's a chart out there, I think you can get from Merhaut, that shows the different soil types
Yes,
and how it relates to depletion, so you don't have to go too crazy with it.
right. However, the lines are for sand. Where's your soil lie,
Oh, yeah.
right? Because there's thousands of different classifications of soil. YOLO, silty clay loam, what does that mean? On that chart.
You guys ever see there's these cheap soil moisture
I'm gonna get to that.
sensors, and then there's the dual prong one.
I'm gonna
that's
get to
got-
that.
That measures pH.
I'm gonna get to that.
Okay.
So, the ones that you're talking about, if you go to the grocery store and you see this water meter and it's for $8, it's a piece of junk. It doesn't tell you anything. We're not sure what it measures.
Can I get this on a recording? If you play
If you
like
open it
lights
up,
or
so
like
Jerry's
what's the
recording.
soil moisture?
If you open up that meter, you have a battery, some wires, and a meter. And so we really don't know what it's measuring. To measure volumetric water content, it takes some circuitry. To measure mixture potential, you need a pressure transducer. So it's more complicated than $8. An aerometer is really simple. It measures pressure, a vacuum essentially. How hard is it to suck water out of the soil? So it's got a vacuum gauge on it, but it's all airtight. It's highly specific. The ceramic is very specific. They're $100, so they're not cheap, but you only need one. You can move it around. Same with the volumetric water content sensors. The least expensive one, I'll guess it's around $100. The really good ones are about $200. You can move them around, but you shouldn't. How you install these sensors is really specific. They have to have really good contact with the soil, no air. So what I would recommend, if you use if you use soil moisture sensors, put them in, leave it. Don't mess with it, because you'll affect how that contact with the soil. If it moves a little bit and you get a gap, you'll get some bad readings. There's a learning curve with using sensors, because you have to understand, what is the reading when your soil is saturated? What is the reading when your soil is at a condition where you need to irrigate? So you need to learn where those points are. Every soil is different. The requirement for every plant is different. Weather's involved. There's all kinds of stuff that are involved.
What about the pH component of those
pH is
meters?
pH is really difficult to measure well. The simplest pH sensors, there's a glass ball involved, and it measures the transfer of ions across the glass, through the glass. And there's liquid inside that glass globe. So if you don't see that, you're not sure what it's measuring. Yeah. All of these sensors, except for, actually, even this little, this one has a liquid-filled glass ball sensor in it. I think all of the ones we have here have that. So.
Sorry, I'm hogging that. Like, is soil pH even
important?
important?
Absolutely.
Oh I'm coming from like a residential, like we're doing like residential projects, and I had a client recently who was like, "Oh, I tested the pH. I don't know what he used. If he used like the probe, or if he like did like strip testing, but like testing soil pH is not that straightforward, because you have to mix it up with water." So I mean, that could be a confounding issue there if you're not using DI water.
So usually when people are growing more acid out here anyway, more acid loving plants, then the pH becomes an issue, like blueberries, azaleas, rhododendrons.
But I see azaleas doing totally fine
You know why?
in landscapes that I've put in,
Right.
and we are not fertilizing them with acid.
No, but you're probably, my guess is you're probably putting a mulch or something on.
Yeah.
And they're shallow rooted, so they grow through that.
Yeah, well,
Right.
but that's why I'm saying, is it really
It can be.
as important as some people might think from the, cause you know, you plant this plant and you put mulch on it, but you could throw, you know, whatever fertilizer on it and you're not really gonna change the pH of the soil ever
It's a combination.
in a meaningful way, right? I
It's
mean,
a
maybe
combination of the
temporarily.
soil and the water. And so you are gonna, it's a problem when it's a problem. And when you see the chlorosis on the new growth, yeah, you have a problem. And if you have everything going well, you have your irrigation uniform, you don't have a sprinkler that's hitting the shrub and leaching everything out, and you have that mulch, it isn't a problem. And most of those plants, like avocados and stuff, will usually form a nice mulch layer and they get the good root system, and it usually isn't a problem. But sometimes it is. Yeah. Am I going out in the yard and measuring my pH? No. No, I'm not out there doing that either. But if I have something particular that I want to savor, it becomes a problem.
Well,
right?
but
You have a high value oak
yeah, but
tree.
let's say you do have a pH problem. I mean, the only solution is to grow a different plant because,
No.
like changing the pH of your soil.
You just
When
have
your
to change
water
it
is
though,
alkaline,
just in that area.
Right, you can change the fertilizer
root
type and
zones.
amend it. People do it all the time.
So he talked about that, he actually mentioned that, I remember hearing him say that when a plant takes up a nutrient, whether it's a positive or negative, it has to exude that same ion to.
Yeah, which that was really interesting. I didn't know
So let's say you have a high pH soil and you have a plant that requires low pH, you can actually get the plant to kind of influence that by feeding ammonium. Because it's taking up a positive, it's got to exude a proton,
yeah,
which acidifies the
which I
soil.
get. But I feel like when I've gone to a nursery and I hear people going, you know, like, and they recommend, you know, sulfur or something,
Sulfur works too.
but it seems like the sulfur is maybe more of a temporary,
What's the soil amendment?
because is that gonna have like a long lasting,
Usually, once the system is in balance, usually
then it can
it'll take care of itself
self-sustain.
after but you'll see that sometimes. People usually grow the things that they can grow, right? And that aren't a problem.
Yeah.
But when you get to that client that wants to have a Japanese garden with azaleas and stuff, chances are you might want to consider things to make the pH a little lower and more acidic so that those plants will thrive. Because chances are, you do a landscape like that, you're gonna run into a few that aren't gonna respond well to our system. So that's kind of how you do it.
And Harry, I agree with you, plants are really resilient.
Yeah.
They are really resilient, some more than others. Yeah, like Don was saying, that if you have a Japanese garden or some, let's say a Pacific Northwest type garden, and you want those kinds of plants, here in California, first you need a lot of water, but the pH could be an issue, so.
And you're influencing that plant every time you water it too.
Sure.
So you're changing the chemistry every time, every
Well,
application
that's
of
why,
water.
I mean, my personal experience has been that if you add organic amendments like compost, then, I mean, you're increasing the buffer capacity of that soil.
That's
Exactly
right.
right.
The plant does what it does for its own rhizosphere.
Exactly right.
Usually it does.
And,
Yeah.
but I mean, it gets back to the whole over-specified thing. You have people who are like, oh, you're planting azaleas, you gotta throw all this acidifying whatever, but you actually don't.
Yeah, it depends, again, it's gonna depend on like the cultivar,
Right.
you may have some that are more sensitive. But yeah, everybody's correct here. It is what, things are resilient and you're doing mulching, so you're working on that. It's the people that aren't doing that and then they're over irrigating
Raking up
and they have
all the
no
mulch.
drainage and then everything turns yellow.
And I should make a statement here too, is that we're talking about plants and soils. If you talk about plants in containers,
Yes.
that's a completely different
Well, that's-
story
yeah,
because,
it's
and that's,
totally different.
and to be honest with you, Ari, this group focuses on nursery and greenhouse production. That's what UCNFA is, Nursery and Floriculture Alliance. So that the reason why we're talking about pH and EC control and management is because of
For the
growing
nursery
in
application.
these containers, which is really difficult. Soils make is completely different. And to be honest with you, a little easier.
Yeah.
Because
More
in that little container, you have to provide everything, all the nutrients, the proper chemistry, the proper amount of water, all the physical stuff in that little container for the life of that plant that is in that container. You put it in the landscape and the soil, it's different.
And I'm a little concerned now.
I was gonna ask you, how good are the soil testing kits that Home Depot sells?
I don't know, I don't know them, so I can't tell you. If it's for pH and EC, if it's a colorimetric one, they're okay.
Mhm.
You have the same issues with, like you saw, that trying to guess between the numbers and interpolate between the numbers because they're not really precise.
Actually, what I think that I was looking at was it's just a bag sort of thing, and you fill it up with your soil, and it tells you where to send it for a test. And, is that legit?
I don't
Home
know.
Depot.
Yeah, have you
It
seen
depends
those?
on where they send it, right? Yeah, I don't know
Yeah,
the labs where they send it to. But for growers, he had a lot of examples from Waypoint. They're one of the companies in California that are, Bill Darling right there. Owe Madkin, who was the founder of that company, way back when it was called Soil and Plant Labs. So back in 1954, there's this book called the UC Manual. It was edited by Ken Baker out of UC Berkeley back then when Berkeley still had a horticulture program. That used to be the Bible for nursery production in the United States. It was the first publication on how to grow plants successfully in containers in artificial media. Owe Madkin was one of the authors of that book. So this guy's been around, and that company's been around for a long time, specializing in ornamental production. So they have a lot of experience, and there's other labs in Watsonville. Perry Labs has been around for a long time. They specialize in ornamentals and the berry crops around Watsonville. But there are a few labs that specialize in ornamentals production.
And it's something we provide to our customers. We do free soil and
Yeah,
water.
see, there's more I missed. There's a lot of them, and there are a
It's
lot
not
of
conflict
really
of
good
interest.
ones.
That's something we do. We offer our customers.
There's Fresno's a center of agriculture in California, right? And I can't remember the name of the lab. There's a lab down there that does a lot of the agronomic crops, but also ornamentals. I can't remember the name. When I'm driving to the airport, I'll remember it. But yeah, I don't know what Home Depot does. I can tell you.
There's also Ag Source out of Nebraska.
Mhm.
They've been around for a long time. It used to be called Harris Labs, and they're now called Ag Source.
Yeah, she knows that because she's from Colorado.
Originally from Nebraska,
Okay.
been in California the longest. Of all of them, but yes.
Yeah, but like I said, Waypoint, back in the 60s and 70s, if you wanted information on water and soil and tissue on ornamentals, it was Soil Plant Lab. They were the ones.
And we work with Bill a lot.
Mm-hmm. And Bill, so write down that name if you
Bill
want.
Darlington.
He's super helpful. He's super knowledgeable about ornamentals, plant nutrition. Really great guy, really knowledgeable person.
Yeah, he'd be good with you in the landscape,
That's true.
because I know Bill has a good knowledge base of landscapes.
So do you want to try to test your water using some of these instruments?
The
To
other
see
thing
what-
we have
Huh?
is that Dr. Spinelli has Desitron, if you wanna understand how to
You want me to talk about that?
injecting Desitrons, that's the other thing we have. So we can just bombard you.
In fact, Richard wants to hear about that,
Oh, the pH stuff I'm curious about.
but he's gonna talk about liquid feed.
Oh, yeah.
Only if there is interest. Or would you rather play with meters and measure everything you always wanted to know?
Can I get both?
Sure. Unless you wanna go home earlier, I'd be quick. So,
It doesn't matter at this point, we're at that stage of the day. We leave now or sit and call.
how
Just
many
the
of,
Cliff Notes version.
What's that?
Just the Cliff Notes version.
Just the Cliff Notes version.
But I don't know if Gerry would.
Jerry, we have a question
Yes, sir.
about this whole demonstration. Does it involve a chicken?
not anymore. So how many of you use dosatrons like these things? How many of you use them? How many of you have
Oh.
seen them?
Good.
Why are they cool? Why do we like them? Or do we? Or why don't we?
Just for spot treating stuff that.
Spot treating. What's easy. It's easy.
Yeah.
What's good about them compared to one of these Venturi more cheaper fertilizer injectors?
More accurate.
Much
They're much more accurate.
Called hose on.
Yeah.
There's one called hose on.
You know those that I'm talking about, that is basically the water goes through, there is a restriction, and it sucks in water through a tubing. It sucks in the fertilizer through a tubing. Matsi is one of the companies that makes them. Why do we like? Are these better? Are those better? Nobody knows. So when you buy those Venturi, like, they give you this big table that you have to look at, right? What's on that table? Pressure in, pressure out. Nobody? Okay, so when you buy those, you have to look up on this table the amount of fertilizer stock solution that is injected, like how much fertilizer this thing sucks in and mixes in with your irrigation water is a function of the pressures coming in. So maybe you have a filter upstreams that gets clogged. Now the pressure is lower. Now your injection ratio changed because it's dependent on that pressure. These ones, and there is a couple of different companies that make these. There is a piston inside that goes up and down, and so basically for each quantity of irrigation water that goes through this machine, there will be a quantity of stock solution, a volume of stock solution that gets sucked in. So there is a proportion that is constant. That's why they're also called proportioners, fertilizer proportioners. And there's a dial here that you can adjust and turn around, and you decide what's this proportion. So now with these machines, you're not dependent. Your injection ratio is not dependent on pressure anymore, and so that's why it remains constant. And you can turn around this dial here, and you will see 1 to 100, 1 to 50, 1 to 200, right? And that means that for 100 gallons of irrigation water that went through the machine, 1 gallon of stock solution was sucked in and mixed in. And traditionally or customarily in the industry, we use them at 1 to 100. That seems to be the ratio of choice. And very often I see growers putting in the stock solution 1 pound of fertilizer per gallon. So that's the standard. When I walk into a greenhouse and I have a conversation with the grower, I'm like, all right, how much fertilizer, how much nitrogen, are you applying? How many parts per million of nitrogen, or how many parts per million of ammonium nitrogen are you applying? They say, well, I don't know. I put the dosatron at 1 to 100, and they put 1 pound of fertilizer per gallon. When we want to really push things a little harder, we put 2 pounds per gallon, right? If it's not 1, it's 2, right? Why do you want to go through too many calculations? And again, in the old days, you could get away with this because there weren't so many regulations around nitrogen. These days, you wanna be a little more careful, and so that's why today I will bore you to death with an Excel spreadsheet that allows you to calculate your final concentration in your irrigation water, and so you will start from your formula of fertilizer, and in this case I put 17,517, which is just one of the fertilizers that are used in the ornamental industry. And here I put 1 pound per gallon. And this spreadsheet is available to you on my website, and I grade out all the cells that you're not supposed to touch where there are formulas. So all you have to do is to put the formula of your fertilizer and how many pounds per gallon are you putting in your fertilizer stock solution. Who's confused? Yes, sir.
I just have a question. So
Yes, sir.
if it's 1 pound goes in that 5-gallon bucket, then are you talking 5 pounds? With 5 gallons of water to fill up the stock?
Yeah.
Okay.
This is, I think, this is larger than
If
5
that
gallons.
typically, yeah, I mean, or not typically, but I'm imagining that as a 5-gallon bucket.
Yeah. This particular one, I think it's larger, but yes,
Okay.
typically there are 5 gallons. There are
Okay.
5 gallons. So you will go ahead.
So if you only filled it for 3 gallons, you put
So
3
3
pounds.
gallons, yeah, okay.
So
And
here
3
I
gallons
put
of water, right.
pounds of fertilizer per gallon of stock solution, of water in the stock solution. Yes, sir.
But you have to remember, if you're doing it on a larger scale, that fertilizer displaces a certain amount of water. So you can't fill the bucket with 5 gallons of water and then start dumping your fertilizer in.
So I guess the final volume should be 3 gallons.
Okay, all right.
And this is on your website?
This is on my website, and my website is on my business card. And these are my business cards. It's a chain of
I think I got it.
events. Oh, okay, you have it. These are my business cards. So who wants to go through these calculations? How many of you care? All right. Oh, a lot of people care today. Okay, so we have 1 pound per gallon. And then here I put that dilution factor on the dosatron. So this is the dilution factor. It means how much this stock solution is mixed up in your irrigation water. And so these are the conversion factors that Dr. Merhaut talked about. And he said for nitrogen is 1. He said that for phosphorus is 0.43. Because again, the fertilizer companies express these first 3 number, the second number, which is phosphorus, is expressed as P2O5. Do I say it right, Don? And so only 43% of that P2O5 is actually phosphorus.
So instead of a chicken, it's a cow.
Right, just like the chicken is a cow, and the other one is a pig, right? It has 83% of meat in it. So I multiply by these conversion factors, and I get this 1 pound, I multiply by 17, and then I multiply by the conversion factor, and I get how many pounds of nitrogen, how many pounds of actual phosphorus, not P2O5, this time now it's actual phosphorus, and how many pounds of actual potassium, we put in 1 gallon of this stock solution. Everybody's with me? So these are how many pounds, these are how many pounds are there, and then I convert the pounds into grams. So now we know that we have this many grams of our 3 nutrients per each of those gallons. And then I divide by these numbers, so I get pounds per gallon of each nutrient and grams per liter. And I use these metric system units not only because I'm from Europe, but also because it's a lot easier to go to ppm, because milligram per liters are like ppm, like we said earlier. So now we know that I have 20 grams of nitrogen, 3 grams of phosphorus, and 17 grams of potassium in each liter of this stock solution. Is everybody with me? Okay, so now this 20 I divide by 100 because of each milliliter or each gallon of this solution get mixed with 99 of water. So it gets diluted 1 to 100. So I divide these 20 grams by 100 and they become 0.2. And then that's why they become 200 milligrams per liter. 0.2 grams are 200 milligrams. Does it make sense? So the last step is dividing by this number, which most likely will stay the same. And so these are the final parts per million of each of these elements that we have in our final irrigation water. Now, ask me a question. Ask me a question. Nobody?
I have a question.
Yeah. Only if it's about these 3 numbers. No. Ask me a question about these 3 numbers. Hey Gerry, are these 3 numbers okay? Are they too high? Are they too low?
No, they look
Right? We have the word experts here. You have 2 words experts in this room. The regional board is bothering you, telling you you're applying too much nitrogen. So now we have 2 word experts here.
Where?
Or you can also cheat by reading here if you want. But you can ask the word expert, are 200 ppm of nitrogen in the liquid feed? I'm growing geraniums. Are they too high? Are they too low? Are they okay? Do I need 2,000? Do I need 20? Do I need 2? Is this okay? When I walk into a greenhouse and they tell me, well, Gerry, we are applying 17,517, 1 pound per gallon in the stock solution, then we inject at 1 to 100. What do I tell them? I tell them, you're cool, keep doing what you're doing. Or do I tell them, no, you're really low on your nitrogen, you should put more, put 4 pounds per gallon. Or do I tell them, no, you're wasting money on your fertilizer, like ½ pound per gallon would be plenty. What do I tell them?
I think it's high. It's too high.
All right.
I think it's high if you're doing it every day.
All right. Why is it high if you're doing that every day? It also goes back to what you said earlier.
Yeah, every day, it's too high. Yeah, we usually have like a program, and we do it once every 2 weeks or something like that on floral beds. So, and that's already, beds that are already have color in them and stuff like that.
Would it be the same if you were growing woody stuff instead of color, like herbaceous stuff, or is it the same?
Very different.
Very different,
It's way too high.
Tell us the truth, Lauren. Tell us the truth. Now we want to know the truth from those that know.
200 parts per million, I would recommend only for a poinsettia crop or mums that are deficient for a pickup feed. And I think more typically 100 20 or something like that is more typical, based on my old knowledge.
You have that knowledge, yeah.
What happens if, like in that picture, I have my geraniums that are being irrigated with normal water every day, and then I have my irrigator that goes there every once in a while and applies the fertilizer, but it's not a liquid feed that they get every day. So in that case, would 200 be okay? Maybe, right?
Yeah.
But I would ask,
Yeah.
why aren't you giving a feed every day? Because of the days you're not giving feed, you're getting no feed.
Cause I don't have time to fertilize every day.
But you're
I'm
irrigating
just
every
being
day.
devil's advocate.
Yeah, but you're irrigating every day.
Well, then maybe every week you're doing a pour-through method and you're measuring how much nitrate you have in there, right? So if it's not continuous, if it's a spot thing, like you were saying, maybe it's okay to have it higher than if you have it every time that you irrigate, right?
So I'm gonna do a little sidebar here.
Yeah.
So if I ask a grower,
That's me.
if I ask a grower what their feed program is, and they say something like, well, I'll do a liquid feed on my crop, I'll put 4 irrigations on, then in the 5th one I'll do a clear water, and I'll say, why are you doing the clear water? They'll say to leach out the salts. I will say, then you're feeding too high. Because they should be able to feed every irrigation and still manage salinity and still maintain the proper amount of nutrients in that media.
It wouldn't be that much different than a human being and whatever concentration you have in your bloodstream, I assume. But also the idea that if you're constant feeding, if you're trying to push those plants out, again, depending on what kind of plant it is, you would probably want constant feed and the highest concentration you could with a minimal amount of salt and potential damage. So you'd have to get that analyzed and you'd have to start with some foundation. Otherwise, it's a shot in the dark. And yeah.
So going back to tissue testing, water testing, and soil testing. So let's say for an example I give in my class a lot is we get a report, the water sample looks fine, the soil sample analysis looks fine, but my tissue's low in nitrogen. Well, why? Right? Because it doesn't make sense. If the water and soil look fine, why is my tissue low? Well, you have to remember that tissue and water sample was taken at the same day, and the water sample was taken on the same day. That tissue experienced something the previous week or the previous 2 weeks or something, so something else happened in the past, because it's historical, right? So now you have to look back to see what happened. Maybe instead of getting 1 clear water irrigation, it got 2 or 3. And that's what happened in our greenhouse because it was really hot. We didn't have enough water pressure to go through the injector. They were irrigating too many irrigations in a row with clear water because of the water pressure. And that's what kind of stuff that tells you.
Plus, you also need to be careful when you're taking tissue samples.
Mm-hmm.
You wanna take them in the morning, especially because the plant is more turgid. So you're gonna get a different reading in the morning versus taking one.
And so that's why you have to do what Don said, follow the recommendation of the lab that you're using, because their instructions follow their protocol, and most labs have slightly different protocols, so you have to follow what the lab says. And what lab A says may not be applicable to lab B.
And tree crops specifically, for avocados, you take it during a certain time of the year, the calendar year.
Yep.
3rd or 4th leaf back from a non-flushing, non-fruiting terminal. So it gets very, very specific on those plants. The other thing that can influence it is a foliar application of a nutrient that you may or may not know went on. So it can be all over the board.
That's why you keep records.
Yep.
Also, what needs to be on there, in my opinion, is maximum solubility of the product you're using. Because there's a wide range there.
Okay, so when you look at these fertilizers, there is this table here. Is any of you familiar with that table? What does the table tell you? So here there is a table for that particular fertilizer that tells you how many ounces per gallon to achieve 100 ppm. And all these kind of fertilizer have these tables. And so the way you use it, you will look for your injection factor that in our case was 1 to 100. So you will be looking at this column, and we were using the 17%, right? So 17% of nitrogen, and so you will go here and you will get that you need 7.8 ounces per gallon in that stock solution with your dosatron set at 100 to get 100 ppm of nitrate in the water. So that's the way you use those tables. And also you have a similar table that tells you the EC, the electrical conductivity, that adding that quantity of fertilizer to your irrigation water, how much it increases your EC. Why is that useful? Why do we want to keep an eye on our EC?
You don't want it too high, it'll burn the plants.
You don't want it too high, it will burn the plants, right? So in that case, we were using a concentration of, what did we say, 100 no, 200 of nitrogen, right? What did we say? We're at 200 ppm of nitrogen, and we said it's a little too high, and it was 17,517, so it's right here. So if we're doing that, we are increasing our EC by 1.4 decisiemens per meter. So maybe our water here in San Diego, we have water that comes in already, it's close to 1, right? It's 0.8, 0.9. So now by adding this fertilizer, we're increasing it by 1.4. So it goes to 2.3, right? So then you can, this is also a way for many growers, they go at the end of the line, they take a sample, and with one of those machines, they measure how much, what's the EC. So that's how they convince themselves that their dosatron or their proportioners are functioning correctly, are actually injecting the quantity of fertilizer that we think they are.
Was it an EC over 3 was bad?
Yes.
In general, yes.
That's kind of like,
For some plants, 1 might be
Right,
high, so
yeah.
in general, 3 is the magic number.
Is everybody happy with this? Anybody's confused? Okay, the last thing that I want to do, calibrate your dosatron. There is a video of this Dutch guy on YouTube, and you can scan this code to get to it. And simply what he does, he uses beakers, just like this. So you can use a bottle like this and make a dilution of 1 to 100. Right? You do 1 to 10, and then you do 1 to 10 again. It will be 1 to 100. And then you can measure it with your EC. Right? So you know this particular stock solution, if I dilute it to 1 to 100, it will give me this EC. Then you can go to the end of the hose, take a sample and measure it. Measure the EC. That way you convince yourself that your dosatron is actually injecting at that ratio that you think it is. And you can adjust the dial, etc. Another way, maybe a better way, would be to have a Horiba and measure how many ppm of nitrate you're injecting. If you know that most of it, if you know the percentage of nitrate that is in that particular formulation of fertilizer. Yes, sir.
How often should you do that?
Well, so the dosatrons they have moving parts that wear over time. And in fact, you can buy a kit to replace them. And nobody does that. Nobody does that. And there are and they're plastic parts. And depending on the model, they tell you how often you should replace these moving plastic parts inside it. So I don't know exactly how often you would go there and do that exercise, but at least I would do it every season to make sure that you're injecting how much you think you are. And again, you can buy the kit to change the moving parts inside the dosage.
If you're measuring, you see it, it's pretty fast, so.
Right, so it's not a lot of work.
Yeah.
The other thing is keeping them out of the light, so when you're not using them, store them somewhere in the dark, because plastic just corrodes in the light.
And it depends on a lot of you, if you have well water, for example, you know what comes with water, well water, sand comes with well water, right? It will just, it's like sandpaper and those plastic moving parts, so you really have to watch the performance.
All right, with these, unless there are other questions, I hope I bored you enough today. This is another.
I think we should charge them more.
Yeah. This is another evaluation that you can scan and you can go online and provide some feedback. I wish I could send one to my ex-girlfriend to improve myself as a boyfriend, but at least I can improve myself as an advisor, so that's possible, and I appreciate your feedback. And with these, back to you guys.
You ever want someone to clean the chicken for you?
And if you want to play with the instruments, they're here.
So I want to give away these books. So let's see. Who came from the farthest distance? Let's see.
The Disney.
Is Anaheim? Do they count?
Where about?
Moreno Valley, is that part of it?
San Jacinto.
San Jacinto's pretty far.
I'm from Northern California, so I have no idea.
I think Disneyland is further than Marine. I'm not sure.
Google Maps.
Google it.
Flip a coin. Well, that was too hard, huh? Not too definitive. So, baseball question.
62.
And you have to be a real baseball geek to know this, because I just saw it just like 2 minutes ago.
What is it?
Huh?
What is it?
So someone was just named to the All-Stars, on the National League All-Stars team, who wasn't voted on the team. He was an All-Star last year, but he wasn't voted to be an All-Star this year.
What team?
Huh?
What team?
Freeman. Freddie Freeman.
He was an All-Star for White Sox last year.
Oh.
We'll be here all night.
Yeah.
If we just yell a name like Babe Ruth, do we win?
Yes, Carlos Rodon, he's in San Francisco Giants right now. He was replacing a pitcher who I don't know, won on the Korean League, so there was an opening, so they named Carlos Rodon. What else? So I don't know anything about football.
The girls are getting the mileage from where they were on their Google Maps. Why don't you ask them how far?
Oh, I already, Moreno Valley is 50 miles, Anaheim is 62 miles, so.
Okay, Anaheim. I got another one.
Well, she gets the other one.
You have to come up with a question, Gerry.
Come up with a question?
Yeah, thank you. You too.
What's the EPA limit for nitrate in drinking water? What's the EPA limit in both units?
Oh.
Sure. I said it.
Several times.
Twice.
10 what? Of what? Parts per million of what?
She said 10
45 of the.
Yeah.
No one grabs
Oh,
that's right.
One of them was 45.
She said 10 and 45.
We wanna know the units.
Oh, of ppm,
Of what?
of the nitrate nitrogen?
10 or 45?
10 of the nitrate nitrogen.
She got some.
Let me.
Yes, they are.
Thank you, everybody. If you wanna hang around and test your water